Okay, welcome everybody. We are here at Attorney-General Mark Dreyfus's office again in 2025 after coming here many times in 2024 because we need to protest his failures to protect Australian citizens from miscarriages of justice. We're going to talk about two people today. David McBride, the war crimes whistleblower, who's in jail because Attorney-General Mark Dreyfus refused to lift a finger and declared what David had done was in the public interest, which meant he shouldn't have faced trial at all, because unfortunately any whistleblowing involves breaking the law. And in Australia, we like to suppress whistleblowing, and so we prosecute whistleblowers to the full extent of the law because they've broken the law, so that sends a message, a chilling message to other potential whistleblowers not to do the same thing. And you can just imagine how effective that is and how much actual corruption is seething there beneath the surface in Australia because people in levels of government know corruption and crimes are taking place, but they're too scared of the consequences because of this system that this man came to power promising transparency for. He even passed a law supposedly bringing more transparency, but when confronted with actual cases where he could do something, such as in the case of David McBride, he showed his true colours and David McBride is now in prison. And he's been in prison for almost 300 days. There's a hearing for his appeal early next month, or in early March actually, a bit over a month away in Canberra. Help David McBride, get on the website to support David McBride and make contributions so that his legal team can fight that appeal and help get him out. That man exposed real wrongdoing by our military, and he deserves to be treated as a hero, not as a criminal. The other person we're going to talk about is Dan Duggan. I must say I've been furious since the 23rd of December. The last time I was here, we talked about the fact that Dan Duggan had been in jail for over 2 years. He has not broken any Australian laws, but his team, his legal team, had already warned me that they feared that Mark Dreyfus, the Attorney-General, would use the cover of Christmas to approve his extradition. And that's exactly what happened on the 23rd of December. Under the cover of Christmas, when all the political goings on in Australia had died down, all the courts had closed, etc., he approved an extradition that he had no basis to approve. And in doing so, he betrayed an Australian citizen, and that's what all Australians should find both shameful and frightening. Because we expect our government to protect us as citizens. But what Mark Dreyfus showed is this: if the government coming after you is the United States of America, your government will not protect you. That's what his decision showed. They make an exception for the United States of America, and that is unacceptable. It is shameful. He is the chief law officer of the land. He could stop this extradition because it doesn't pass the first legal hurdle. An extradition is only legal if the crime which the target is being accused of is a crime in both countries. That's in every extradition treaty we have with every country, including with the United States. And what the United States has accused Dan Duggan of is breaking an American law that has no equivalence in Australia. We don't have the law that he broke here. So it does not pass the first legal hurdle. However, there's this quirk in our extradition treaty with the United States that was written in the 1980s, which is really strange. It's bizarre, in fact, and that quirk is this: the legal test for whether it meets the requirement for dual criminality can only be tested in an American court. Think about that. It is bizarre that to test whether you qualify for extradition, you have to be extradited first and face that test in the American court. But that's where Attorney-General Mark Dreyfus comes in, because as the chief law officer of the land, he can overrule all that. He could have said, no, He didn't need a legal test. He could say, no, he has not broken any Australian laws. Therefore, I, the Chief Law Officer, says that we will not extradite him. But instead, he did the opposite. And to show you they know how dodgy it is, these cowards did it under the cover of Christmas. And that is a message to every Australian citizen. If the government coming after you is the United States, your government is so subservient to the United States, they will not lift a finger to help you. We saw it with Julian Assange, and we've now seen it in the case of Dan Duggan. This last weekend was the 26th of January, Australia Day, and on that day, hundreds, thousands of people around Australia became naturalised Australian citizens. Dan Duggan did that in 2012. January 26, 2012, he became a naturalised Australian citizen. And what that means is he became as Australian as you and I. He'd moved to Australia in about the year 2000 because he met an Australian girl. He started a business down in Tasmania, a joy flight company called Top Gun. He married an Australian, he had Australian kids, and in 2012 he wanted to become an Australian citizen, and he became one. And from that moment on, he should have been covered by all the protections that all Australian citizens deserve. And he wasn't. He's been betrayed because of our subservience to the United States. So this is shameful. We must not tolerate it. And what we have to do is put excruciating popular pressure on the Albanese government, on Attorney-General Mark Dreyfus, and say to him, this is not on, buddy. Right? We expect you to uphold the laws of the land, including the laws that require you to protect Australian citizens. And you haven't done it. And that kind of pressure can only come from the people. Now, the good news is that Dan Duggan has been able to organise an appeal. It was really touch and go from the 23rd of December onwards, because from that date that the extradition was approved, he could have been bundled out of the country at any time between the 1st of January and the 17th of February. There's a 6-week window for the actual transportation. And if they had have taken him to America on the 1st of January, that would have allowed no time for his legal team to file an appeal in the courts, because the courts were closed. And they were terrified, the family was terrified over Christmas that might happen. As it turned out, he wasn't bundled off straight away, so about 2 weeks into the new year they were able to file an appeal, and that puts the extradition time frame on hold until that appeal is heard. So that buys us political time as Australian citizens to highlight this case, because if we believe in justice, if we believe in these principles that supposedly define us as a democracy that supports the rule of law, we've got to apply it to the cases that matter. It's got to be seen in the way the law is exercised. It's not just words and rhetoric. And our government treats it that way. This is rhetoric they use for elections to make themselves popular and get elected. But we have to hold them to account when they fail to apply those in cases like this, just because for political convenience they don't want to upset the United States. So this is our job for the Australian people. Get behind this fight, get behind this family. Go to Free Dan Duggan online, just Google Free Dan Duggan, you'll see how you can contribute to the family. They desperately need everybody's help. His wife, Supreme, I've just noticed, is actually in training to run in the upcoming Canberra Marathon as a way she can raise money, because they are not being allowed to fund their case through other means. They're being forced to fight this with one hand tied behind their back legally, but they're so desperate to get something done to stop this extradition, because otherwise, once he is extradited, he is at the mercy of the US justice system. And in conclusion, let's just talk about the US justice system for a minute, because the US justice system is supposedly the gold standard of justice in the world. That's what we're supposed to think. That is the gold standard of the rule of law. And the reason we're supposed to think that is because the Americans tell us that they define the moral standard for the world. The Americans do that. Well, right now, the current President of the United States and his immediate predecessor, Joe Biden, the former President of the United States, both showed by their actions that they think the American justice system is corrupt and weaponized. Joe Biden has just pardoned and given preemptive pardons to the most people in history because he has no confidence in the American justice system not to be weaponised. And Donald Trump agrees with him because it was weaponised against him in Donald Trump's argument. So how can Dan Duggan, a guy who is only being targeted because the most unsavoury, unscrupulous, evil, warmongering American politicians want to have a fight with China, and they've picked a scapegoat from Australia as someone that they can hold up as an example to make Americans paranoid, and they want to scapegoat this guy as part of their war, there's no way he will get a free trial in that justice system. No way in a million years will he get a free trial because of the craziness that's gripped the United States on this issue. And if the American presidents don't even have confidence in their system, how can the Attorney-General of the United States? If that's what he will be exposed to, thrown to the mercy of, if we don't stop this extradition. That's something the Australian people can help with. Get behind this case, get onto your Member of Parliament, get onto this guy who's such a coward, he's never here when we come to these weekly protests. Get onto this guy, but demand action, demand they block this extradition, and if they're not going to do it, support their families' appeal in the courts, so hopefully it happens that way. Anyway, I'll end there. These are the kind of fights that define a country like Australia. They go down in history, you can be part of it. We have to stop our government being so subservient to a foreign power. If you want to live in an independent, free, democratic society, fight to get our government off its knees to the United States, get behind the Dan Duggan campaign. Thank you very much.